Hello, this is Rachel here again. I'm going to make a video about, well, it's kind of a rather personal story, something I haven't discussed in video before, and it's to do with when I left the Witnesses and what my spiritual belief was at the time. And you'll probably find it quite interesting. And it's interesting that in the year leading up to when I was finally disfellowshipped, which was June 2013, so that the previous year was when they brought out the new understanding about the faithful and discreet slave, saying that they hadn't been appointed over all the master's belongings in 1918 or whenever it was, 18 or 19, but that appointment would be in the future. Therefore, I felt, well, these men of the governing body were prematurely claiming authority over all of God's people. So I felt that it was within my rights to question them. After all, Jesus did say who really is the faithful and discreet slave, and then warned about an evil slave. So it seemed to me that I had every right to question them to make sure they were in fact being faithful and not being evil. Of course, later on, once I left, I came to realise that the Witnesses had really hijacked that parable of Jesus to make it seem like Jesus was appointing an organisation that one must join to be saved, whereas I don't believe it actually means that at all. I believe it's talking about individual Christians who can be either faithful or unfaithful towards their master Jesus, not an organisation. Anyway, so I began questioning that year, and at the same time, for the previous 10 years or so, I had been suffering from a chronic headache problem, which I now am inclined to believe that that has a little to do with all the way I had to repress what I was thinking and feeling, and repressing my emotions over all the years that I was a witness, where my conscience was bothered by things. So, and you're just not allowed to express yourself as a witness. Otherwise you're labelled as being ungrateful and disloyal and unthankful and selfish and proud, all these things. So you just keep your opinions to yourself, don't you? But yeah, I think it had a bad effect on my physical health. But anyway, I had been trying, reluctantly, I eventually decided to try some medications to try and help with the chronic pain, of having a headache every day. And towards the end of 2012, I tried a medication that, even though it diminished the headache somewhat, it had some rather unwanted side effects. Like for one thing, it made me feel like my whole body was literally buzzing. Or the way I describe it is like when you're holding a hose, a water hose, and the water is going through the hose, and you can feel it vibrating in your body, in your hands and that. That's what it felt like. Well, it wasn't a very pleasant feeling. It made it very difficult to go to sleep. But it also made me very, perhaps uninhibited in my speech, and I could blurt things out and say things. My judgment kind of went out the window a bit. And I was under the effects of this medication when I went to the convention in January of 2013, where I had spoken to a sister in my congregation, and we were talking about the shortcomings of the organisation, of Witnesses. We're talking about hypocrisy, basically, because there had been a demonstration at the convention that morning. And anyway, she was saying that despite our imperfections and our hypocrisy, that we are Jehovah's organisation, And I just said, I don't know. And she kind of freaked out. And I think perhaps if I hadn't been on that medication, I might not have come out and said that out loud. You know, because that's quite a big thing for a witness to say, isn't it? That I don't know if this is Jehovah's organisation. Whew. Anyway, in hindsight, I'm very glad that I was on the medication that reduced my, well, it made me less inhibited, and I spoke out. And her reaction was just ridiculous. She got really upset and packed up all her stuff and ran away, literally, and ran off and told an elder. So I'm very glad now that that happened, because it really propelled me out the door. You know, it made me face up to things and get out of the organisation. But also, at the time, and it might have been due to the medication, although when did I stop it? Because I decided to kind of like take on the elders, and I wrote to the elders and told them that I'd been stumbled by the governing body. And I talked about the new understanding of the faithful and discreet slave, and some other things that I had problems with, other teachings that didn't make sense, and that the literature seemed to go back and forth on and be a bit ambiguous and inconsistent. So I wrote this letter. I think it was like a couple of pages long. And then eventually I decided to have a look online, because yeah, you know, if I had discovered these inconsistencies and lies coming through the literature, then why not look at other stuff online? So I did. I went online and looked at ex-witness material, and I joined an ex-witness Facebook group, and that's when I discovered just how many people were hurting. You know, I'd never really given it any thought before, because I was like the goody two-shoes witness in the congregation, never aware of anything going on, and kept my own business. Wasn't a gossiper or anything, or cliquey. So I'd never really thought about people who were disfellowshipped, perhaps disfellowshipped unjustly. I didn't think about how they might be coping, how they might be feeling. For the ones that the family members, they had to shun them. I didn't really give them any thought either, well, that's not entirely true, but I didn't think deeply about how deeply it would be affecting them. It was fairly superficial. But when I went online, then I saw the immense suffering and the way families have been ripped apart, torn apart, husbands having their wives leave them and vice versa, and fighting over the custody of the children, all because of some silly little rules made up by the governing body, and them labelling anyone who disagrees with them as an apostate, and then painting them as some evil, satanic, antichrist. It's just disgusting. And anyway, I felt very compelled to go to the elders and go through with the judicial meeting and let them know how I felt about things. And even my husband at the time, who's never been a witness, was surprised at how passionate I seemed to be about it. And he said, what's influencing you? And I got cross at him, actually. I thought, what do you mean, what's influencing me? It's the Holy Spirit, of course. Because that's what I thought. I felt that Jesus had called me out of the organisation, that, he was calling out his sheep, and I was one of those sheep being called out. And I even described my separation from the governing body as being like a birth, where the governing body was the placenta that provides life to the unborn baby. And in my thought processes at the time, I likened the governing body to an aging and defective placenta, and that if the baby wasn't delivered and cut off from that supposed life giver, then the baby would die. And so I viewed myself as the baby. And anyway, when I decided to reject the governing body, it was like cutting the cord. And then I felt like I was delivered into Jesus' arms, and to begin a new life as I used to call myself a free Christian, not tied to any body of men who would dictate to me my beliefs and my conscience. So, and if you listen to my judicial meeting recording on JW Struggle, I do talk about Jesus a little bit, and those Christians being called and enrolled in the heavens. I think I mentioned that. And I think I also said during the meeting that Jehovah had work for me to do. So I really felt that I was being moved by the Holy Spirit to take action against injustice. In hindsight, I look at that now and I see that it was my inner voice, my inner disgust at injustice that moved me. You know, I moved myself to take action. I think when you leave an organisation like the Witnesses, where it is being one of Jehovah's Witnesses was my entire identity, my entire purpose in living. If anyone asked me about me, what I like to do, the first thing would be I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. You know, that's it. That describes me. That's my life, because it is your life. Every aspect of life comes under that umbrella of being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So it is your whole identity, and you know, you have a measure of security in that knowledge. Well, when you believe it, like I did, you think you know why the world is bad, you think you know what the future holds, so you feel secure in that knowledge. So I think when you go through the process of leaving something like that, finding out that it's false, you know, I felt like a marriage partner, you know, that had been betrayed, you know, like the governing body was like the husband, and they pretended to love you and care for you, but really they were having an affair with somebody else, you know, and you feel betrayed. That's exactly how I described it to my non-witness family, that I felt like a wife who had been betrayed in the most intimate way, you know, and that the governing body really didn't care about the sheep at all. They didn't care about inflicting injustice upon people and splitting up families and that sort of thing. So it was a very deep betrayal, and it's a very, very, very intense time, because the indoctrination and conditioning as a witness is so powerful. It's, you know, when we'd meet 3 times a week, then they dropped it to 2 times a week, but every day is filled with something spiritual. You're thinking about it, or made to feel guilty about not performing to the expectations of the governing body. So it really just envelops your whole life and the way you view things and your thinking and everything. So it's very intense, having to come to terms with that not being what you thought it was. So I think what I did in my mind was create like a bridge to get me from that thinking as a witness to get me to where I am today. And so I think it made it easier for me to leave the witnesses by believing that the Holy Spirit was guiding me out and directing me somehow. So I had a few little experiences that seemed to, at least I used myself to cement that idea in my mind. Like, the convention that I went to, the last one that I went to as a Jehovah's Witness, where the sister ran away from me, I only went on the Friday. I didn't return on the Saturday or Sunday, and on the Sunday I went to visit my mother. My daughter and I went to visit my mother, and we went to a pottery exhibition and looked at some art. And I guess, I don't know, I wasn't intentionally looking for signs or reading things into things. Like, we went to a cafe and it had some artwork on the wall, and the artist had very cleverly shaped the canvases as, well, they weren't canvas, they were board, like puzzle pieces. And there was a really nice painting of a sparrow all alone on the ground on one of these puzzle piece things, and I sort of looked at it and thought that it was kind of like me, that I was now alone, because I'd separated from the organisation, alone but free. But I was in this puzzle piece that had the little connection, the way that they're shaped, sort of, like bumps and, little bumps and things, that I was now free to connect with other people. So I had this thought of connection in my mind. And the following week, my husband and my children and I, we travelled out of the town to go to an air show. Well, actually, my husband went to the air show, but me and my daughter, we went and did some other stuff. But it was really weird that on the way there, a cat got hit by a car in front of us. And so I made my husband pull over, and it was really busy traffic. And my daughter and I went back to where the cat was lying, and it had been killed. It's not very nice. So I went down the road to it was a small plant nursery, and told the lady there that we'd seen a cat get killed, and did she have like a cardboard box or something we could put it in. And so she came back with us to the cat with a box, and she actually ended up taking it back to her place, and she was going to bury it at her place and then put some flyers around or something to see who owned the cat. Anyway, and then that day, it was really strange. 3 times a dog crossed the road in front of my car. Yeah, 3 times in one day. A cat, and then 3 times in one day, which was kind of odd. So what I told myself, because this was an unusual occurrence, really, I said, this is Jehovah testing out my fitness as to be someone, of the 144,000. Am I kind and sympathetic towards animals? This is what I was telling myself. Also that same day, we arrived at this town fairly early. Shops were open though, and we pulled into a car park behind. There was like an art gallery in there, and it was virtually empty, an empty kind of car park. So I parked in there, and I just scanned around, and I saw this little tiny sign that said Searchers Market. And this was like I think this was the back entrance of a shop, and it said Searchers Market. So we went over and tried the door. I thought it would be locked because it looked like a back entrance, perhaps just for staff. But it opened, so we went in, and it was like a big second-hand shop. and they had a big sort of open back shelving unit for books. And so I was rummaging around in the books with the feeling that I was looking for something. Anyway, I was poking around and a book fell off the shelf, and it fell through the back side of the bookcase. So I went round the other side and picked it up. And the title of the book was The Master is Calling. So you can imagine that I thought, oh, this is a sign. This is a sign from the Master, Jesus. He's calling me. And basically I had a few little experiences like that. And whether I was looking for, whether that would have happened ordinarily and I would never have thought anything of it, I don't know. Anyway, I had a few things like that. Yes, and the local church had a sign out, and it was in the shape of a puzzle piece, and it said Jesus is the missing piece, but peace spelt P-E-A-C-E. So again, I saw that as a sign, connecting with, oh, that's right. And then a book that I picked up at that Searchers market, the dedication in it had something to do with connections. So I had puzzle pieces, connections, and I told myself that these were signs that Jehovah was directing me. I haven't told anyone this before. There were other things like that. So it's been a long journey from then to now. That was 5 years ago. And initially, in the first year or two, I spent a lot of time discussing biblical things, biblical subjects and understandings and interpretations of prophecies and things on different online groups. And at the end of the day, concluded that there wasn't really the evidence to back up any of them. That if I'd go down one avenue thinking, oh, this looks promising, this makes sense, then I would hit a brick wall and think, oh, hang on, no, it falls apart at that point. Try again. And the same thing would happen over and over. And just observing what other religious people do and believe really has led me away from belief and faith in the Bible as being something of God. I don't know whether there is a God or a deity, if you want to call it that, but I feel pretty certain that it's not the one that's described in the Bible. To me, what's written in the Bible is more evidence of human thinking, and there are so many inconsistencies in the Bible itself and things that just make me feel so uncomfortable. When I think about it, the Bible, I recognise now that as a Jehovah's Witness I suffered terribly with cognitive dissonance, where I would be perhaps taught two different things at the same time. Like, for example, as witnesses, we were taught, from Jesus' teachings to be like merciful and kind and loving and forgiving and all these nice qualities. But at the same time, you were taught to be judgmental and to shun, and that the things don't really gel together. And it's easy to blame just the organisation, the teachers, the governing body for this, but when you actually look at the Bible itself, it has the same effect. The Bible itself alone would give you cognitive dissonance. It's very difficult to line up Jesus, who is supposed to be, whether you believe he is God or not, but he is supposed to be the exact representation of God and think he said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So pretty much they're supposed to be thinking the same things. Yet you see God in the Old Testament as sometimes not a very fair or appealing character, and it didn't sort of fit with the image that you have of Jesus in the New Testament. So that alone causes a degree of cognitive dissonance, I think. So having said all that, it doesn't mean I've shut the door completely on the Bible or on Christianity. I mean, I'm still open to be convinced, because I'm just a mere human. I don't know everything, and I try to be open to other people's thoughts and ideas, but I am more of a, I require evidence before I can believe something, before I can stake my life on something. And I mean, I'm still a moral person, and I live by the morals that I did learn. I mean, I may have lived by those morals without the Bible anyway, like my husband. But yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. So I know this will be disappointing to some people, but that's where I am at, and I don't judge people who think differently, and I hope they don't judge me either. But yeah, I don't know if I was going to say anything more or not. I think that's about it. If I think of anything else, I might have to add a part 2 anyway. Bye for now.